All right, aloha and welcome to the Fit2Fat2Fit Experience podcast. It's me, your host, Drew Manning. Thank you guys for tuning in for another great episode here on the podcast. Just want to say super grateful for everyone throughout the years for the support. You guys are awesome. You guys are amazing. I'm super happy and fortunate to have my podcast still going. After 9 years now? Holy crap. I cannot believe it's been that long. Anyways, I'm still here, still trucking along. I have another great episode with the CEO and co-founder of a company called Kion, Kion. And they recently reached out to me because they make essential amino acids. And I've heard a lot of, people in this industry talk about the importance of essential amino acids. We do a deep dive into what are essential amino acids, why they're important to supplement with, why they're important to have. And I thought Angelo did a really good job of explaining and using analogies of why amino acids in general are important for us because they're the building blocks of protein. And protein is one of the most important macronutrients, right? We have essential amino acids, right, which are proteins. We need protein to survive as humans. And we talked about the importance of supplementing with them, especially the essential amino acids. So we do a deep dive into all of that, but we also get into his story. This dude's got a crazy story. He was raised in Austin, Texas. He he opens up the podcast talking about this story of when he was almost beaten to death as a 16-year-old kid while on a bad LSD trip. And he talks about that experience and what he learned from it and how that factors into his journey eventually into creating Kion, this brand with some really cool products that I think you guys will be really excited to learn about. He started his professional career and lived in France and India for several years. He speaks multiple languages. Like I said, he's got a really cool story, but we do a deep dive into essential amino acid supplementation. And if you're interested in improving your performance, improving your health, improving your body composition, and you want to learn how to utilize amino acids, this is the episode for you. So I think you'll really enjoy. Before we jump in, this episode is also sponsored by Kion. And if you're interested in getting a discount on their products, you can go to getkion.com/Drew, DREW. So that's getkion.com/Drew for a special discount on their products. I take 2 to 3 scoops as a pre-workout. It doesn't have caffeine or anything like that, but essential amino acids can also be used as a energy source for our mitochondria to push yourself during a tough workout. So I definitely am a big fan of supplementing with essential amino acids, especially as an athlete, someone that's looking to get more out of my workouts. And we talk about all the applications. So stick around for the full episode. And if you want to go check out their products, go to getkion.com/Drew. And without any further ado, let's go hang out with Angelo. All right, Angelo, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today, man?
I'm good, Drew. Thanks for having me, man. I'm pretty stoked for this one.
Yeah, me too, man. I'm excited to dive deep into not just your own personal story, but the brand that you've created, which I've heard about. I've been in the fitness industry for years, and I definitely want to do a deep dive into all of that. But you have some pretty incredible stories that, in my opinion, I believe our experiences kind of shape who we are, right? And I would love for you to talk about some of your earlier childhood experiences that have kind of shaped who you are today, and what you've learned from them. And then I'm sure we'll be able to tie it in at the end of like how all of that has led you and guided you into creating a brand that probably comes from lessons learned from these experiences. So there is one experience that I want to ask you about when you're 16 and it has to do with an LSD trip. Do you mind opening up the podcast talking about that?
Let's jump right in, man. It's
Let's
going
do
in
it.
deep right away, but yeah, I'm ready for it. Yeah, so I mean, maybe like a little bit of context about
Sure.
me and who I
Let's do that.
was as a 16-year-old. Um, I was raised in a family of small business owners, entrepreneurs, and the culture overall was like pretty hippie and crunchy and alternative. They were like in the health food business, and like I didn't go to like a normal doctor when I was a kid. I like only went to naturopaths. I didn't get a birth certificate until I had to go to first grade. They like finally got me a birth certificate. So I'm like from a pretty alternative kind of hippie family
Mm,
that's really into health. But I'd say that also is like pretty traditionally entrepreneurial in terms of like we didn't follow tons of rules, and even like I was brought up with like to have like character and good values and to tell the truth and do things like that, but it wasn't like do it exactly this way. It was kind of almost like encouraged to find my own
Mm,
path. And I
that's
think,
cool.
you know, I'm grateful for that. And whatever combination of it is being raised like that, and then the genetics of it, like I just pushed every boundary I could push, and while still trying to like be approved of and do well in school, but like I just pushed a lot of boundaries. And I think when I hit adolescence and the combination of like brain changes and hormones and social stuff, I did become much less interested in uh, school and approval with the adults, and much more just like deep into like the social stuff in my own mind. And that took me into like partying and drugs and psychedelics at a pretty young age. And so it wasn't my first time, but when I was 16, I took some acid with a friend. I took way too I did took more, and I took way too much. And I lost my mind. And I
Yep.
think, in like plant medicine circles, they'll say like it's kind of like ego death or something like that. I don't know what you call it, but like I had a psychotic break, I had ego death.
Yeah.
I lost my mind, and I was, yeah, I mean, I really felt totally separate from this kind of reality. And I was scared, and I was trying to get help. I was at a friend's apartment, and I was in a neighborhood that was a little bit more hardcore than I'd say like where I'm used to being. And I upset and provoked some other people in the building, and
Mm.
they beat me really badly, and they
Wow.
stabbed me twice in the back, and they
Dang,
stabbed
dude.
me in the knee. And the police or first responders found me downstairs. I still don't really know how I got down there because I couldn't walk down the stairs in like
Yeah.
this gutter in the parking lot. And I still kind of remember the guy. It's like this like it's funny. It was like this like Hispanic looking man like in a cowboy hat. I still kind of remember his face. He's like, "Are you all right, man?" And I was like, "Ah." And I remember the like feeling what's when I was really with the paramedics, like I could just really just like let go and kind of just like falling. And I woke up several days later, and I'm in a hospital bed, and I'm like just black and blue all over, and had to have emergency abdominal surgery because when you get
Wow.
stabbed in the back, they assume you're just like could have serious organ damage. They cut me open,
Dang.
and they had to my patella tendon was entirely severed, so they had to reattach
Oof.
my patella tendon. There's still a cord in my knee.
Dang,
And
dude.
man, my spleen was barely nicked, and like I don't know how much more lucky I could have gotten, like at 16 and a half years old, to provoke,
Dang.
draw that kind of experience into my life. And like naturally, I mean, yeah, I had all kinds of psychological diagnoses, but I'm sure I had PTSD.
Mm.
And I mean, just the physical trauma of that kind of experience, the emotional trauma combined with like a really bad trip. Um, it and luck I was lucky. I got like a lot of grew up being in Austin and being from like more progressive health type family. Like I got access to acupuncture, and I got access to like I was already educated about, but I became much more interested in my diet and in exercise, and like not just for the sake of like playing sports, but of like trying to heal myself, and of doing
Mm.
meditation and reading about spiritual traditions and doing talk therapy. And it was like at 16 and a half, I like really quickly grew up. It was
Wow.
like
Yeah.
this super fast dose of time that, I'll correct that. I don't think I really grew up really fast. I think I got like 20 to 30 years dose of life
Mm.
in one night. And then I spent the next 20, I'm 40 now. I spent the next 24 years like unpacking it. And
Wow.
it was pretty trippy experience, man.
That is crazy, and I'm sure you're at the place now where you look at like life happening for you instead of to you, right? Like at the time, maybe you weren't aware of that, but now that you're older, you're wiser, you see like maybe some lessons you learn from that, whatever it may be. I'm sure you've learned a lot from that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've learned a lot. I learned a lot from it then, and I've
Uh
learned a
huh.
lot from it like over time. I think, I think well, I know I did have a very distinct experience of things don't happen to me. I have an experience of I created this experience.
Okay.
And actually, I had some friends' parents that gave me this book. I'm forgetting what it's called now, but it's like a new age book by Shakti Gawa, and something about creative visualization. And it's the
Mm,
idea of like envisioning what you want in life. And it really hit me that like I had created this experience. And through explicit choices that I make that I'm conscious of, unconscious choices that I make, the decision not to make certain choices, I'm constructing my whole life. And like, yes, I was put into a certain type of body and a certain uh, context of a family and a culture and
yeah.
all that. But like after that and within all that, like I'm creating my life. And it became the beginning of me really wanting to make the unconscious in myself more conscious
Yeah.
so that I could more deliberately create what I really want in life versus like just doing what I've been doing or doing what the people around
Mhm.
me are doing or acting out of like fear because I didn't know how to do it and I was just scared maybe I get, like I don't want to lose or get hurt or be exposed at like not being good at something or whatever it is. And just really trying to make all those things known to myself so that I could make choices about what I really want to create in my life. And it was pretty distinct. I mean, I think
Mhm.
as a young adult, I I turned my life around pretty hardcore. Like I ended up getting a scholarship to college. I graduated as top of my class in my college. I got scholarships to go abroad. I ended up having a career overseas. Like I turned like I suddenly looked like a more successful kid. If you
Yeah.
fast forward a few years, and it wasn't just because I was doing that because I wanted society or my parents or someone else to approve of me. It's because I wanted to get the most out of life.
Yeah. Dude, I love that your journey is remarkable to me. I think we could just, I could do a whole podcast just about your own personal journey. Because that kind of stuff definitely interests me as well. But one of the questions I do want to ask before jumping to the next topic is, you told me about your parents and their approach to parenting you, and now that you're a parent and you
Mhm.
see what you learned, or maybe the good sides and the bad sides of how they raised you, how does that affect how you parent now? Like, maybe talk a little bit about, that experience, that you had. Um, do you parent differently now, or do you see the value in the way your parents parented you, and do you follow suit with the way they parented? I'm very curious.
So I think I see myself as part of a lineage and part of
Hmm.
like, yeah, just generations of people. And so I'm very grateful for the work that my parents did to try to absorb what their parents had done and do better and do their version of
Yeah.
that. And I think I'm trying to do the same thing. So I'm sure that there's aspects of like ways that my parents raised me that I am doing. And there's definitely things that I feel like I'm doing very differently. I
Yeah.
think that if there's something that I really took from my parents, it's to treat my children like companions
Hmm.
in life.
Okay.
It's like I was born, I grew up into an adult, and I'm just kind of like floating through this existence trying to make the best of it. And I meet my wife, and we get married, and we choose to have a family. Now we've brought these new people into it,
Yeah.
and how can I just like really treat them with a lot of respect that they're going to be their own individual people, and that I have my sense of what I think is going to be my best version of being a parent to them, but like
Mm,
they're going to be their own people, and one day they're going to be an adult, it's just like next to me in life trying to live through this thing, and I'm still going to be their dad, and I have certain obligations and responsibilities to them. But I think it's just like a level of respect for your children very, very early on that my parents gave me in terms of like I'm my own person. I think on the flip side of that, I think my parents maybe were did that so much. Like we're
yeah.
so like I felt so independent and so responsible for myself that I maybe, yeah, I just didn't feel quite like clearly supported enough in the right ways.
Okay.
So I really try to like get down alongside my children and whatever they're interested in, whatever they're struggling in, whatever they want to do, and try to be like a resource to them and
Mm,
be like this really kind of like a secret coach, mentor, helper that can help them sort through what they're working on in life.
yeah.
And again, like I'm grateful to you, mom, and dad, but like I don't feel like my parents quite were like that. It was kind of more like, you got it, like figure it out. And
Yeah.
dude, it's pretty hard. Growing up's hard.
Yeah. It's
So
true.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so that's it. I think
Okay.
that's one way that I took something from my parents and one way that I
Yeah.
uh, adapted it and evolved it.
I think that's so cool. And being a dad myself, I do see the difficulty in like, for example, letting your kids struggle, letting them learn from their mistakes and experiences instead of like, hey, I've learned from my mistakes. Let me just kind of micromanage you so you don't make any mistakes, so that you don't feel the pain that I experienced. But then we realize that adversity, that pain, has kind of molded us into who we are today, which probably a more resilient version of ourselves, maybe a little bit smarter with, like, when you were a kid, you're testing all the boundaries and pushing the limits of, of what you thought was cool or good or okay. And sometimes it's hard to let your kid be like, all right, go do your thing, like hopefully you make the right decisions, versus like, wanting to protect them. And that's kind of been my struggle as well. But one of the things I want to ask you about your parents is, and this kind of ties into where I want to go with this is, you said your parents were fairly like healthy and kind of into like this alternative, maybe like functional medicine, if you will. Did they also lead you down the path that you are on today with like supplementation, supplement company, owning a supplement company? Did they kind of have something to do with that, or was that kind of you on your own?
I think that it's like a pretty, I'd like to think that it's like my own thing, but it feels like a pretty clear, uh, I don't know, projection iteration of my childhood. Like my dad
Okay.
was an importer of like botanicals, like in the 70s. He like imported like
Okay.
ginseng and stuff like that. And they
Wow.
owned a natural health food store and they had a natural health food restaurant. And yeah, and they were very into supplements and actually like they were pescatarians. So we said
Okay.
vegetarians, but we ate fish.
Okay.
And so they were actually though very educated about it and very thoughtful about protein nutrition. And so actually like combining specific types of plant proteins on days when we didn't eat fish or tofu,
Hmm.
that are higher in certain types of essential amino acids. And they took amino acid supplements, and my mom would give me amino acid supplements like before and
Wow.
after training certain times a day. So I was made aware of those things at a pretty young age because my parents, I think, chose a specific type of lifestyle with diet where they thought they needed to be more conscious about their protein intake. Um, and
Yeah.
yeah, and then so like now, I mean, Kion is this, not the only things we do are like protein powder, a
Sure.
vegetarian protein powder, and a plant-based amino acid powder, but like it's I didn't fall that far from the tree, I guess. You know?
Well, well, did you plan on getting into the same industry, or were you kind of like, I'm going
No.
to do my own thing? Okay, yeah. So maybe walk us through
Yeah,
how
so I
you
mean,
got
so
into it.
honestly, so after that like journey, so you're like, I think you're raised, people, all of us are raised in certain types of belief systems. And in a
Sure.
major way, like my parents' faith in a big way was like this natural health, whole
Yes.
food type paradigm. And
That
then
was
I
their
grew up and I
religion.
become an adolescent. I'm kind of like pushing back and trying different things, want to be a normal kid and all that, and then I have this near death experience and suddenly I'm like, whoa, like maybe my parents were kind of onto something and like I should be really thoughtful about my health and what I put into my body. And that that kickstarted that whole journey for me. I think also though it kickstarted like a more personal, like, but my parents were into business. I became really
Mhm.
interested in like personal development and philosophy and religion. So I studied religion in college, like the
Wow.
history of
Mhm.
religions and philosophy, and got really into that stuff, into tons of meditation retreats and go stay at monasteries and went to
Wow.
India and stayed at Catholic monasteries and just like I went for like that, and my dad would make fun of me like Saint Angelo that
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
that like I had kind of yeah, just chosen this path that was different than what they had done.
Yeah.
And but then through that, like I got interested in languages and culture, and I wanted to move overseas, and I got really into learning other languages. So it took my career overseas. I lived in France for a few years, and then
Wow.
got a job there, and then it was with Apple. It took me to a job in India. I moved to India, and I ended up back in the United States because of the woman that I love, that's now my wife, really wanted to have kids, and India was not the place for her
Sure.
to raise
I
a
get it.
family.
Mhm.
And, so I made that focus on family really the thing I was going to do. And then once I got to Colorado, I'm originally from Austin, but we moved to Colorado area. I tried a few different companies, started a few different companies. I ran a behavioral healthcare company that was the biggest thing I had done yet, with like 50
Wow.
employees and millions of dollars. And I was pretty young still. I was like 30 or something.
Yeah.
And like that was coming to an end and I wanted to do something new. And it's like one of those things where things just kind of fell into place where it's like opportunities arose and I saw there were certain opportunities and these are products I really cared about and liked, and I love health and wanted to be part of it. And I think in many ways, like me just being on that path of like trying to be true to myself and trying to do things that I actually really care about and like and want to do,
Hmm.
winding up developing a company that was focused on what I believe, based off my understanding of the research, is like the most foundational, fundamental supplements. Like, I think people should be focused on eating whole foods,
Yeah.
like eating real whole foods, things that grow in the ground, animals that really live here, versus like highly processed things. And there are opportunities with supplements to have things that do go through processing. You know, like a whey protein powder gets the whey gets separated from the milk, and then whey
Yeah.
isolate it gets further filtered through a cold process, so you could classify it as processed. But it's a net positive good. I think it's a healthy good thing for people, and it helps people to improve their daily lives in ways that are like very tangible. Like literally they are stronger, healthier, more vibrant, can be more emotionally present with their families, can do activities, and like those are like real products. They're not, you know, you could have gotten into the supplement business with something that was like, I don't know, some new super cutting edge biohacky thing that like changes some frequency in your brain. I don't know. And it's like,
Yeah.
do people really need that? I mean, I don't know, maybe, but I feel like I tried to just focus and be part of a company that was like making stuff that you can take every day and it really is like good for you and sustainable. So, and
Yeah.
I think I got that from my parents.
Okay. I love that. I love that. That sounds really, really cool. So how, why, what does Kion mean? Why that name?
So Kion is based off of this idea of ki from Japanese, which is
Mm,
energy.
okay.
And so Kion means like energy for life,
Okay.
having energy for life in a
And you,
broad artistic sense, you know,
sure.
like a
I love
beautiful
it.
life sense. Yeah.
I think it's awesome. I love the name. So you wanted to start with something very basic instead of like the fancy stuff that exists out there, like nootropics or things like that. That you're like, okay, what do people really need? So why? How did you land on amino acids, and why amino acids?
So, I mean, I'm sure you've gone into detail on your show about like protein to some degree,
Yes.
but I think that's like the
Yeah. Feel
best
free to
place to
dive
just,
into there. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, maybe just like the best place to start is that when we say amino acids, really talking about essential amino acids, and essential amino acids are the active component of protein that we eat.
Okay.
And, you know, when you think about overall nutrition, the primary role of carbohydrates and fat are for fuel.
Yes.
You consume them and you basically like burn them. Fats
Yes.
also go into some of the structure of our body and our cells. But the
Yeah.
primary role is like, if you think about it, really, it's like fuel. And protein is considered a macronutrient because it also can be a fuel source, but that's not its primary role. Like the reason why we really eat protein, and this I think is like trippy or like almost spiritual or so cool, is because the protein in our body breaks down and we have to replace it. So like if we think about our bodies as a house,
Hmm.
fat and carbohydrates are like the electricity that helps, fuel the house, keep the lights on.
Yeah.
um, Protein is literally like the raw materials to help repair holes in the wall, or like the stairs don't work anymore, or you need to like
Yeah.
redo the bathroom or something like that. Because the way that our bodies work, the way that protein functions in our bodies, is that it basically all has a certain half-life.
Hmm.
And I don't think people totally grasp this, but like protein isn't just your muscle.
Yeah.
Your organs are made up of proteins, your hormones, enzymes, hair, skin, nails, like, I mean, your liver, your kidneys, your heart, like over
Yeah.
half of your solid mass is made up of proteins. And these proteins in our body have a certain half life. After some point in time, they're no longer as functional as they were.
Yeah.
They break apart, they literally break down. And the little pieces are these amino acids that go into your blood. And the ones that can't be reused, you pee them out as urea. And the ones you can reuse that are still kind of good enough, you use to rebuild. But you don't have enough amino acids to help rebuild those proteins. So that's why you eat protein. You eat protein, your body digests that protein from animal sources or plant sources. It breaks it down into the little amino acids that are the building blocks of the proteins. It goes into your blood, and then it helps it rebuild your heart tissue and your liver and your kidneys and your muscle and all these things. So if you don't get enough protein, you won't have proteins in your body. So it's
Yeah.
like, so at the most fundamental level, like being in a space where it's like, why are amino acids important? Well, like protein is fundamentally important to just being able to like survive and thrive. So,
Yeah.
well, why not just get into like the meat business then, or like
Yeah.
so like some like protein bar snack company. Well, this
Hmm.
is like one of the really cool parts I think about protein and amino acid science is that not all protein is equal
Okay.
in terms of how it impacts your body. I think for
Okay.
a general audience, like if you're kind of like newer to nutrition science, like overall, like just eating more protein is great for you.
Yeah. No matter the
So that,
source.
yeah, you don't need to like this is not to like undermine your thinking around like, oh, I need to think about every single piece of protein I
Yeah.
eat, but it's more just to describe how all this stuff fits together. So um, protein quality is defined by a few things. One is when I eat a piece of protein, how digestible is it?
Okay.
And some types of protein are easier for our bodies and the enzymes in our bodies to break apart the proteins and utilize the amino acids.
Hmm.
Generally, animal proteins are easier for our bodies to break apart the proteins and utilize the amino acids inside of them. That doesn't mean that you don't get the amino acids out of plant proteins. You could be vegan and you could eat sufficient amount of proteins, but animal proteins, that's generally why they're considered higher quality is because they're more digestible
Got it.
generally. But you could
Yeah.
have a dairy intolerance or different types of an allergy that you maybe don't digest chicken well, one person, but overall typically they're more digestible.
Yeah.
Then the next piece is that like when you digest that protein, how much of the protein is made up of the essential amino acids. And without like
Okay.
overcomplicating this, there's two main categories. There's more than this, but there's two main categories of amino acids. Some are essential, some are non-essential. The essential ones, the 9 that are essential for a couple reasons. One is because your body can't synthesize them. That's actually where they get their
Mm.
name from as
Okay.
essential. It's like you have to eat it, and if you eat it, then your body can actually make the other amino acids inside of your body.
Gotcha.
But the other really important part of essential amino acids that often is overlooked is that they're the part of the protein that communicates to your body to build new proteins. That's what we call stimulate protein synthesis. So when you consume essential amino acids, the body says, oh, we should rebuild new proteins.
Okay.
And they've done many crossover studies with this where you have only non-essential amino acids or essential amino acids or them combined, and it's very clear essential amino acids generate all the stimulus of new protein synthesis. So when you're looking at a protein, one is how digestible is it? Second, how many essential amino acids does it have in it? And again, things like eggs, milk, chicken, those tend to be higher in those. So that makes it a quality protein. Then the next question is like, well, what's the proportion, and this gets a little nerdier, of certain essential amino acids? And without going into it, some of them are more important than others. And if you have certain ones, the BCAAs actually, leucine, isoleucine, valine, and some other ones, lysine, they they basically promote more muscle protein synthesis.
Okay.
Okay, so like we're kind of going down the line of like what makes a protein helpful and important. And this is
Sure.
one thing that's really interesting now and very often overlooked. The form of the protein that you eat. So whether you eat 70 grams of beef meat as part of a mixed meal with broccoli and carrots and mashed potatoes,
Okay.
or you eat 30 grams, less than half of that, as just isolated beef meat, like on its own,
Hmm.
they'll create equal amounts of muscle protein synthesis. So you could eat less meat, you could eat half the amount of protein, but if you eat it on its own, it will stimulate as much muscle protein synthesis as the other, the double the amount in a mixed meal. And that's
Gotcha.
because your body's ability to digest that protein, to break it down into the amino acids, and then to utilize it and to have these peak concentrations of amino acids in your blood is what allows your body and tells your body to make new proteins.
Mm. Okay.
So, this is now why, and this is interesting, if you choose to use a protein powder, and I first of all, I just want to say, I encourage everyone to eat many whole food meals per day. Like eat
Yeah.
delicious, awesome whole food meal. Like, and if you're vegetarian or vegan, like oatmeal and tofu and things like that. If you're meat based, like eat eggs and sausage, or eat salad and chicken. Like eat delicious foods that you like. And if you're looking to hit extra protein requirements throughout the day, Something like a whey protein isolate generates 3 times the amount of muscle protein synthesis as a similar amount of just like beef meat. And
Interesting.
that's
So like,
because the whey protein isolate is easier for your body to digest, becomes
hmm,
immediately available to the amino acids become immediately available in the blood and then become available to stimulate, muscle protein synthesis. And I think you were telling me, Drew, like you're into like beef protein isolate.
yeah,
I don't
yeah,
I don't know of an exact study comparing the beef protein isolate, but I would say it's a very similar idea because they're isolating the protein and it's breaking it down to a further
yeah.
degree. It's more immediately bioavailable and it's going to stimulate more muscle protein synthesis, probably around 3 times the amount as if you ate the similar amount of like actual beef meat.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember you talking to me about that, which I think is so important. And I'll just say this, like I'm like you. I err on the side of like, hey, eat whole foods as much as possible. And also I understand as a dad, as a busy parent, like life gets in the way. We live in a very fast-paced society. Not everyone has time to meal prep. I totally get that. And this is where supplementation has, has a benefit over, whole food in certain situations where you can just like grab and go. You add the powder to the liquid and you shake it up and you drink it, and you're getting more bang for your buck in those situations. But always whole food will trump any kind of supplement, long term, especially when it comes to overall health, I think. But in our fast paced society, we're a society of convenience. We want the quick, the quick fix, if you will. It's a little bit easier for most people out there. So I think there's a time and place for that. Um, Talk to me about this then. And this is the question that I was hoping that you can answer. And I think a lot of people might have this question if they're kind of educated on this topic: is what's the point of taking an amino acid supplement like Kion versus just eating adequate amounts of meat? And maybe address that.
Yeah, so here's like the next degree after you get past that whey protein
Okay.
comparison to meat. Essential amino acids are just the concentrated form of the amino acids that are in protein in the most
Hmm.
bioavailable form.
Okay.
So in studies, like 10 grams of essential amino acids create 3 times the amount of muscle protein synthesis as 70 grams of beef protein as part of a mixed meal.
Wow.
And even just and in studies as well, compared even to a whey protein isolate, it's 6 times the impact as whey protein in
Mm.
in older populations. So
Okay.
yeah, so let me actually back up here and like just explain in a little bit more detail. So
Sure.
so when you look at a whey protein isolate, the reason why it's so functional and so like works so well is it's almost half essential amino acids and it's very bioavailable because there's like nothing else really in it but the protein. I mean,
Yep.
it's almost all protein. So your body
Yes.
breaks it down, absorbs it really quickly. But it's still only half essential amino acids, which is the
Gotcha.
active component of the protein. Whereas when you take essential amino acids, it's 100% amino acids,
Mm.
the essential ones that you actually utilize to stimulate protein synthesis. So you already are going to get twice the amount of muscle. You would hypothesize twice the amount of muscle protein synthesis gram for gram just because it has twice the amount per gram because whey protein is
Gotcha.
only half. But because it's so much more bioavailable and also because you can optimize the proportions, you can increase the leucine and increase the isoleucine and the valine a little bit. That's why there's studies showing, and this is more for like a 60-year-old audience, and this is going to be a great example of when supplements make sense. What I would say is
Okay.
the older you get, the more sense it makes to supplement.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. And the reason for that is because what I would say is, and this is like approximate, if you're about like 30 years old,
Hmm.
essential amino acids will be about 3 times as effective as whey protein. 40 years old, 4 times, 50-year-old, 5 times, 60-year-old, 6 times.
Wow.
That's like and I'm like summarizing a lot of studies to say this, but it's very well
Sure.
backed up. You can look at the ISSN report, you can look at other studies by church, et cetera, that break this down. So the main idea being, I think, why would you consider utilizing essential amino acids? Well, in the scale, all the way from a mixed meal meat, which I think you should do, like have a awesome dinner with your family with like
Yeah.
beef and broccoli and other stuff, and other times throughout the day, if you're trying to hit higher daily protein requirements, like a gram of protein per pound of body weight,
Yeah.
well, if you know that essential amino acids let's say you're 40 years old, are 4 times as effective as that whey protein, and probably 5, 6, 7 times as effective as the whole food protein. You could take like 5 grams of essential amino acids, and it's the equivalent of somewhere between 20, 35 grams of protein, not as your primary meal, not as like
Yeah.
to replace your eating, but to have mid morning, to get one more protein synthesis spike throughout the day, to utilize before or after you work out, if you like to fast, to have first thing in the morning. Like it is a way to hit those higher protein requirements and get way more benefit than you would from just trying to eat the protein, because you get less and less benefit from the protein the older you get. The other thing
Yeah.
that's really interesting too is resistance training is going to be the best stimulus for
Sure.
provoking muscle protein synthesis. Like if you lift weights, it's going to communicate to the body to have muscle protein turnover, to break down
Yep.
the existing ones and rebuild them and make them fresh. And if you do the right kind of training, you need enough protein to make them bigger and to build more. That said, consuming just essential amino acids does stimulate muscle protein synthesis. So even on days when you're not doing physical training, when you're not lifting weights, or if
Yep.
you're getting older and the weight training you're doing wasn't working as well, by taking essential amino acids on those off days, even, you're still stimulating additional muscle protein synthesis. And the
Mm.
best story example of this is, and this is like almost a 20-year-old study now, but there were a couple follow ups for NASA.
Yeah.
They were trying to figure out how to help NASA astronauts not lose muscle mass in space because there's no resistance training.
Yeah.
Like there's no there's no
Yeah.
there's no weight,
Yeah.
right?
There's no weight
And
and
so like you
gravity.
can think about, well, could we do like, hormones, or could we like, are there certain drug interventions? What could we do? And one of the things they wanted to investigate was nutritional therapies. So they did a study where they kept participants at complete bed rest for 28 days,
Wow.
and they fed them 3 normal meals throughout the day. But these people literally didn't leave their beds. They're going to the bathroom in the bed, etc. Right?
Wow.
They added, though, 6 servings, well, 6 doses of three
Yeah.
servings of the equivalent of basically 15 grams of amino acids 6 times throughout the day.
Yeah.
And again, no resistance training for this whole month. There was no net muscle loss after a month. No
Wow.
physical training, being lying in bed. And that is because the essential amino acids themselves stimulate the muscle protein synthesis. There was some loss of function, there was some loss of strength. Just think you're not
Sure.
using it, but they didn't
Yeah.
lose the actual muscle mass. So when you think about being an aging adult and you're trying to maintain your muscle mass as you age, and there's more anabolic resistance and it's harder to build and maintain your muscle, using something like a supplement to help maintain that muscle mass even on days when you're
Yeah.
not training is totally worth considering. And it's something that eating more protein won't do. You can't just like,
Yeah.
if you look at like the comparisons, you can't just eat another 30 grams of steak. It won't do what consuming the essential amino acids will do. um, I think another really great example is weight loss.
Yep.
I think the primary, when people talk about weight loss, my general sense is people aren't thinking I want to lose muscle, right?
Yeah.
They're thinking
Of
like
course.
I
I
want to
want
I
to
want to
lose
lose
weight.
fat. I want to lose fat,
Yeah.
but I want to maintain my muscle.
Yep.
Well, the typical reason why we think in kind of more traditional like gym circles is like you bulk up, like you eat a lot, you eat a lot of protein, you build a lot of muscle, you get bigger, and then you cut. So you cut
Yes.
calories, and when you cut those calories, you lose fat, but you also lose some muscle.
Definitely.
Um, and the reason why we've kind of been stuck in that paradigm, I think, is because we haven't realized the degree to which you have a huge increase in a need for essential amino acids.
Hmm.
Again, the active component of the protein that we're eating to maintain our muscle when we cut calories. More recent study from the last couple of years, they had people do a 30% calorie cut for 5 days.
Okay.
So in my example, I'm like 200 pounds. I'm rather not like super muscular, but
Yep.
I'm somewhat athletic, and I work out. So I consume about 3,000 calories a day if I'm like exercising that day,
Yeah.
right? Um, if I wanted to cut 30%, that'd be like cutting 900 calories out of my diet. And if I
Yep.
did that over,
Mhm.
7 days, it's probably like a pound and a half to 2 pounds of fat I could lose in a
Sure.
week, right? So it's
Hmm.
not that's not like some extreme. It's not like we're starving ourselves. I mean, it's aggressive, but it's not
Definitely.
like starving myself. In doing that, they uncovered that participants needed a 300% increase in essential amino acid intake to maintain their muscle mass. So
Dang.
now exactly what that amount is, it's probably not like a gram per pound of body weight. It's probably more like 7.5 is what I
Sure.
really need on a daily basis to maintain my muscle or something like that. But like 3 times the amount, that's a lot more protein. Like if I'm trying to cut 30% of my calories, but I need to eat
Yeah.
3 times as much protein. I mean, I need to eat like 300 grams of protein today. Like
Yeah.
that's pretty broy. Like, whoa,
1,200
like I didn't
calories.
even,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a lot. I mean, I'm basically like only eating chicken then or something.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
instead of that and having like a more normal diet, like you could eat, you know, Greek yogurt and oatmeal and salads and vegetables and meats and fruits and vegetables like
Yeah.
normal foods, and you could include a few servings of essential amino acids per
Yeah.
day during during that weight reduction phase. You'll be able to maintain your muscle while you lose the fat. And I have someone in my office who he got a shoulder injury. He couldn't really lift weights for a while, and he really wanted to cut some fat. So he did kind of more serious, aggressive, like macro calorie counting, watching what he was eating, but he upped his daily essential amino acid intake. He lost 25 pounds over 3 months and lost no muscle. He got in body scans like throughout, and he lost no muscle. So to lose 25 pounds of fat over
Yeah.
the course of 3 months and
Yeah.
lose no muscle is pretty remarkable. But it's because he supplemented with essential amino acids. Then the question would be, well, does he need to keep taking the essential amino acids? And like,
Yeah.
is that something ongoing? I would say like no. If I think if he continues the weight training and then eats accordingly, like he probably doesn't have to take as many of the essential amino acids. He could take like a serving a day or take them
Yeah.
when he works out, and so he doesn't need to be taking like 4 or 5 times a day.
Sure.
So I think those are examples of how supplementation can be distinctly different
Okay.
and in complement to eating whole food.
Yeah, I can see that. And while you're talking about this, I was thinking, man, this would have been a cool experiment to use during my Fit2Fat2Fit journey of me losing the weight, cutting calories, over the course of 6 months, trying to lose 75 pounds and testing, my lean body mass with taking something like this. But I don't plan on doing another one. Just saying, like, because it was freaking hard. But so okay, so here's the question I had. But along this thinking that you were just describing with the amino acids. One of the questions I had is like, with that thinking, could you essentially eat less protein, like eat maybe even half the amount of protein, but supplement with the essential amino acids and still get the benefits of building muscle as someone who's eating more protein without amino acid supplementation? Has there been studies done on that? Because that's what I was wondering. Is like, okay, I could see someone if it's that effective and it increases muscle protein synthesis by that much, in theory, what I'm thinking is you could get the same results by eating less food, and supplementing with more, essential amino acids. And in theory, you should be able to build lean muscle as you would if you were eating like, twice the amount of protein. Does that make sense? That question?
It makes sense. So
Okay.
first thing is, and I know you're sensitive to this, I just want to make sure I'm cautious in saying neither of us is encouraging people to like replace your food with a
Yes.
supplement
Of
necessarily.
course. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's a good question, I think, for like
Yeah.
performance minded people.
Yes.
So what clearly has been shown is people eating like even higher than the recommended daily allowance of protein,
Yep.
and then adding in particularly with like an older demographic, adding in 2 servings of like 7.5 grams, like a serving and a half twice a day over the
Yep.
course of 3 months, adding almost 10 pounds of muscle, lean mass in a few months. That's a
Wow.
lot of lean mass to add. And it came by no other intervention versus the placebo group than consuming the additional essential amino acids.
Okay.
I think the question though would be, well, because I think more what you're saying is like, let's say I'm consuming a gram per I weigh 200 pounds and I'm consuming 200 grams of protein per day.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Could I cut out 100 grams of protein and
Yep.
instead just consume like 30 grams of essential amino acids, and would I get the same results as
Yep.
the 100 grams of protein? I think the first thing, this is what I'd say is I would say I don't think there's been a study that has done that exactly. What has
Sure.
occurred though is athletic populations consuming higher amounts of protein. I think it's more like 0.7, 0.75 grams
Yeah.
of protein per pound of body weight, and being very athletic and adding the essential amino acids and adding significant muscle mass. So it kind of depends on how much protein are you currently eating. Like
Yeah.
if you're eating 400 grams of protein a day and you're like, what if I cut it down to 200 and then do like, I think it could be different based
Yeah.
on what your starting number is and where you're going to. But I think in the
Okay.
simplest terms, what I would say is this: the recommended daily allowance for protein is zero point 0.4 grams per pound of body weight. So if I'm a 200-pound guy, that's 80 grams per day of
Wow.
protein I should be eating. Like that's the bare minimum. And that's like to not have hair loss, not have really mood disorders, like
Yeah.
fatigue, like feel pretty messed up. I would never recommend anyone go below that with
Yeah.
whole food protein, right?
Sure. I agree.
But like, let's say I'm up to like, 120, 130, 140, maybe 150 grams of protein. And to get to that last 50, I choose to replace a protein, like 2 scoops of whey protein, which is giving me like, 40 grams of protein or something. And
Yeah.
instead, I'm just going to do like a scoop or two of essential amino acids. The science points towards like, yes, you're going to get the same results, if not better results from the
Got it.
essential amino acids because they stimulate more muscle protein synthesis than that amount of whey does. I mean, depends on your age and your exact health condition, but it's going to stimulate more. The other thing that's interesting is that
Yeah.
so the reason why it works, we're getting like a little nitty gritty, but it goes to the heart of your question, is because like I was describing earlier, the proteins in your body, your muscle tissue, your all the other proteins, they're breaking down and they're releasing those amino acids into the blood. There's
Hmm.
some non-essential amino acids that are just available in your blood. So when you consume the essential amino acids, they stimulate the new muscle protein synthesis. They're building new proteins and they're utilizing some of those non-essential amino acids that are already
Got it.
just in the blood. They've been broken down from your existing proteins. And it's sufficient, right? To some
Yeah.
degree, it's sufficient. Like, I don't think you could live only on essential amino acids. You'd have to eat some non-essential amino acids, but it's generally sufficient, like in one serving or 2 or 3 servings. And if I'm eating throughout the day as well. So what
Got
that
it.
tells us too is that when we even consume like a really high quality protein, like a beef protein isolate powder or whey protein isolate powder, there's a significant portion of the non-essential amino acids that we don't need. They actually get converted into sugars via gluconeogenesis. They get converted into urea. You pee them out. So it is more efficient and it would likely help you build more muscle and be leaner. It'll be a leaner bulk. So you could
Okay.
build at least as much muscle, if not more muscle, more efficiently
Hmm.
with likely you're going to get this you're going to get the same if not more like diet induced thermogenesis. You're increasing your metabolism because you're building these proteins, you're building more
Yeah.
muscle, and you're doing it with less surplus of these amino acids and also no carbs or fat or any of these other things. So um, the answer is yes, but it's nuanced.
Okay. Dude, I have so many questions. I think it's great information you're putting out there. I do want to talk about timing because I'm sure timing factors into this. Talk about optimal times to supplement before, during, after exercise. You mentioned on days off, still supplementing with it. Talk about like dosages and timing.
So purely for the goal of protein synthesis. So this is
Yeah.
not like overall health, but purely for the goal of protein synthesis. Generally, when you consume essential amino acids as a supplement or as a food, it kicks off basically a spike of protein synthesis that lasts for a few hours, 3 hours, 3, 4 hours. It kind of depends on the protein source, but it's about that long. So ideally, you eat protein or essential amino acids every few hours throughout the day when you're awake. And if you do
Yeah.
that, you're basically going to maximize the opportunities for rebuilding the proteins in your body. It's going to lead to the healthiest muscle fibers, if you can say, strictly from a nutrition perspective, if you need to exercise and do other things, etc. So I think with that in mind, then you can kind of just see like, well, if I'm eating protein, I don't know, at like I have breakfast at 8, or I have breakfast at 7 in the morning. I have lunch at like 1. I have dinner at 7 again. Those in between periods, like the snack periods,
Yep.
are great times to supplement,
Okay.
um, because they're going to create one more spike of muscle protein synthesis. Um, I think if you're an older adult, the older you get, this will start to make more sense. Like maybe at age 40, but really like 50 and above and 60, 70, it could make sense to take the essential amino acids actually during your meal. And the
Interesting.
reason for that is because when you drink, if you were to drink them like right during your meal, you're going to stimulate a bout of muscle protein synthesis. Again, it's not of the same degree as like going out and like lifting weights and then eating
Yeah.
some protein, but it's of the same type, right? You're basically communicating to your body, hey, he'll rebuild these proteins. So if you were to drink that, say, instead of iced tea or a soda or like whatever
Yeah.
else you're going to drink during that time period, it actually is going to communicate to your body to utilize the protein in the meal to build new muscle in the body. The
Got it.
reason why I say it makes more sense as you get older is because like you need that more. Like if you're 30 years old and you're generally pretty healthy and you're consuming protein, like, and you're working out, like trying to like optimize every last moment of like how to maintain my muscle, like that might be like a bit it makes sense. I mean, you could totally do it if you're 30 or 40, but I think as you get older, it makes more and more sense to where actually taking it when you're eating other protein will create a better utilization of that protein. And this is honestly something that took me a while to grasp because I was just like, I don't get why you do it again. And it was through really extensive conversations actually with Dr. Arnie Ferrando, who's one of the lead researchers on the international the ISSN, International
Okay.
Society of Sports Nutrition panel that released the paper, just trying to understand it. And it's like, yeah, it's profound, but it does make sense for a more anabolically resistant group. And then other than that, like, yeah, whenever you're not eating, before, during, after exercise, you'll get more out of the exercise. It will promote
Yeah.
basically better muscle performance and more muscle growth. It'll reduce muscle fatigue and it will improve your recovery time. And that's even true for aerobic exercise. I
Yeah.
used to think it wasn't really true for aerobic exercise, but even like when you go for a run, like take it before you go for a run, it'll help you preserve the muscle, maintain reduce muscle fatigue, improve recovery, and build more muscle from even the running itself.
Yeah, I'll say that's kind of what I've noticed. I've been taking the product for about like 4 weeks now, I think, and I rarely get sore, but because I just came from a phase of like running. Last year I did a lot of running, kind of took a break from lifting, if you will, and got like more efficient at running. Then I started supplementing with these to like help build some muscle now that I've lost a little bit. And yeah, the biggest thing for me that I've noticed is just my ability to push harder in my workouts and do more. And because, the first week, when you go from running to lifting weights, even like a simple workout, like bench press and like, pull ups or something, you feel it because you haven't really engaged those muscles for a long time. But I've noticed after taking, and then after talking to you, like last week, I started supplementing with like 3 doses instead of just 1 dose, and that's been a huge performance booster with ability to push harder and longer in my workouts and recover faster and not feeling sore. It's been a game changer for me. I haven't really tested out with cardio yet, although I will be paddling this season here in Hawaii. I'm going to try out for a paddling team, which will definitely, I'll be putting it to the test. So that's kind of what I've noticed, just kind of my own anecdotal evidence of like, hey, I'm able to, go harder, longer in the gym, not feel the need to, be out for a few days after a really hard like leg day. So that's kind of what I've noticed with it. And, I'll be honest with you, I was skeptical before because I'm like, I don't need amino acids. I've seen some people online talk about how they're kind of a waste. As long as you're eating enough protein, you're good, and that might be true, but at the same time, I do think there's something, especially as I get older. I'm 43 now. Yeah, I want to maintain and preserve my lean muscle mass. I was actually just talking to Dr. Jim Stepani, who's been in the fitness industry for years. He's 56 years old, and yeah, he talked about the importance of taking essential amino acids, especially at his age, to maintain. He's like, yeah, look, at some point, you're not going to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. Arnold, like he's in his 70s, he's not looking like he did when when he was in his 20s. Obviously, you're going to lose it, but if you can preserve as much as you can, the older you get, the better off you'll be. And so that's kind of the way I'm looking at it. Is like I'm investing in my long term health by maintaining as much lean muscle mass as I can as I get into my older years, so that I'm not frail and losing muscle mass a ton like as I get into my late 40s, 50s, 60s. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I think the experience you shared around exercise is like very common, and the approach around your perspective of something changing as you get older, like maybe something becomes more useful, which I
Yeah.
I named like in this whole conversation, like it does make more sense the older you get. Like it makes more sense the older you get, or if you're have aggressive, weight like
Yeah.
weight cutting type goals, fat cutting goals, or you're really trying to improve your physical performance. Like you're like,
Yeah.
trying to compete as an athlete or something. And
Yeah.
just to address like some of the skepticism, I think from
Sure.
some people, um, it makes sense because of the way that nutrition science works and the way that nutrition marketing works. So,
Hmm.
about 40 years ago, a lot of this science around amino acids started coming out. What we first uncovered were that these branch chain amino acids, which maybe people in your audience have heard about, BCAAs,
Yes. Yep.
they were uncovered, and we did uncover. And if you look at actually the spikes, like they create this spike in muscle protein synthesis, but it's so short lived and it
Hmm.
doesn't sustain that they don't work. They're a waste of
Okay.
money. It is true. BCAAs taken alone are a waste of money. They don't
Okay.
like they're not worth your time. And so with that, then like I'm trying to give credit to other people with it, like podcasters, influencers, people who are trying to encourage people to be healthy, etc. Like you generally get familiar with that story. Okay, they studied
Yep.
BCAAs, they thought they were good, then they got disproven, and then you're kind of like, oh, they're bunk. And then someone's talking about essential amino acids, and you're kind of like, ah, it must be the same crap. Like it must be the
Yeah.
same stupid story.
Yeah.
Um, but if you look into the research around it, and I only bring them up again because I think they're
Yeah.
they're really pretty legit. The International Society of Sports Nutrition is the leading academics that study things like protein, creatine, amino acids, but they work at universities, they're PhDs, right?
Yeah.
They all hold each other accountable. They do reviews of all the literature and they come out and they say what's worth it. And basically, like the supplements that are worth it, the things like primary things in the bucket are protein, creatine, essential amino acids. There's a couple others that like I think are probably more like niche for your audience, but like
Sure.
it's legit. And I think I might have mentioned to you, like even the ISSN study on creatine, it's older now, it's like 20 years old. They reference like 100 studies,
Okay.
which is a lot of studies.
Yeah.
Creatine's been
Yeah.
studied a lot. For the recent essential amino acid one, they reference like almost 130.
Wow.
So
Impressive.
the science is there. I get that like influencers and podcasters and people like they're not as familiar with it and they had the bad experience of the BCAA thing, but like if you go and you read the research, like these things we've been talking about today about the differences of different protein quality, how the essential amino acid components of different proteins impact you, whether you eat them alone or not, the way that like a beef protein isolate or a whey protein isolate works, the way that essential amino acids work, like this is very published, legit science. It's not
Yeah.
like some again like new cutting edge like I
Yeah.
don't know nootropic botanical I found from India or something like that. It's like
Yeah. It's not funded by Kion, and
it's
Kion
not
just
funded by
funds
Kion,
all the
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, we didn't fund any of this. I mean, and I just want
Mhm.
to say that too. I'm like so grateful to these researchers for doing this because, like,
Yeah.
like our approach has been like with our products is just take what the research says and then like make that. So, like, if you look
Yeah.
at Kion products, like, you see exactly how much of each amino acid is in the product, and that's because like all these researchers have published it, like these
Yep.
studies, all the things I've given examples of, it's like this formula, and we would only be able to do it if they had done that hard work. Which not only do I think it's important to just like tell people what's in a product, so you should tell them like how much of each amino acid is in there,
Yeah.
and to make sure it really is legit with what the research studies said, etc. But also like it's not some proprietary thing that we made up. Like it's
Yeah.
what hundreds of pretty hardworking, dedicated nutrition scientists have worked on. And
Yeah.
so I say, thanks to them, thanks to people like Arnie Ferrando and Robert Wolf and David Church now and Kevin Tipton and like all these people that they've spent a lot of time.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's why the last question I was going to ask you is like, okay, what makes Kion aminos different, like than other amino acids? You mentioned BCAAs versus the essential amino acids. Like, maybe talk a little bit. Maybe like
Yeah.
you talked about your honest label, scientifically validated. You're kind of
Yeah. I mean, I'll
using.
just say like what you would want to look for in an amino acid supplement. And that's what we do. But
Okay.
if you didn't choose Keon, like this is what you'd want to look for. Number one, make sure it has all 9 essential amino acids.
Okay.
So
So there's
if you
9.
if you kind of hear this conversation, you go out and look, you might find some that have like only 3. which is
Okay.
only the branched chain amino acids.
Yep.
And an essential amino acid supplement should include those 3, but also have 6 more. There are some brands that only sell 8, and it's like really old bunk science from the 90s, like one study. But like if you look at hundreds of studies over the last 20 years,
Yeah.
you need all 9. And then it's really make sure they tell you how much of each one is in it.
Yep.
Like have it to where you know exactly how much leucine, isoleucine, et cetera. And it's not just like proprietary formula, because it really matters. Like, maybe with some supplements and mixes of botanicals and stuff, it doesn't, but like you want certain proportions. And then these are the proportions I would encourage you to look for.
Yeah.
Basically, you start with the proportions that are in human skeletal muscle.
Hmm.
Like literally, when they do biopsies of human skeletal muscle, it's a certain proportion of leucine, isoleucine, valine, histidine, all of these. And then you increase the leucine to be 40% of the final formula. And then you increase isoleucine and valine to maintain their original proportions. And you increase the lysine, because the lysine's slower to get into the muscle. And this is like, again, like tens and tens of more recent studies. Like this is the formula, or very similar formula they use. That's what you want to have. So if you look at, I mean, even for comparison, if you choose not to get Kion, like you'll see like the basic dosage of them. You'll see the relative proportions. If you see another formula and it's like super high in tryptophan, it does not need to be super high in tryptophan. The tryptophan can be very, very low. It's very low in human skeletal muscle, and it
Yeah.
plays you want it, but it's a very minimal role. And you want those proportions of leucine in the other ones. And then I think the other main thing I'd look for is just like not a bunch of other stuff. Like you don't need caffeine in it.
Yeah.
There's some brands that put caffeine in it. We didn't get into it, but essential amino acids themselves facilitate energy production.
That's what I've heard as
Yeah,
well.
so they
They're kind of an
literally like
energy
help
source
the
for your body.
mitochondria. Yeah, they're not just the energy source. It's not just they get converted into energy. They actually facilitate at the location of the mitochondria in the muscle the production of energy. So they'll
Mm.
improve your overall energy production. But anyways, you don't need
Yeah.
caffeine. You don't need other amino acids like arginine or citrulline or other things they may put in it. And you don't need a bunch of other like additives or and if you choose to get a flavored powder, like just look for clean ingredients. If it's
Yeah.
capsules, it's going to be like pretty clean and minimal. Like maybe you'll have like some rice powder. It just helps it not like get all sticky and get into the capsules.
Sure.
Yeah, so it's like look for clean. And so that's what we do. My experience is I have tried, I mean, this is why we make this. Like, there's not really anyone else doing all those things. There's like, I think some legit brands, but they do it proprietary. I know people behind it, so I'm like, I think it's legit, but I actually don't know because I don't know what's exactly in it. Um, and then others where
Yeah.
they are good, reputable supplement brands, but they don't actually have the right proportions, or they put a bunch of other stuff in it. So
Yeah. I
that's
love it.
that's why I that's why we made it the way we made it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on, Angelo, and did this is a great podcast all about amino acids. And I actually enjoyed it a lot because I think there's a lot of things that I am still learning about, supplementation and amino acids and learning about the science behind it. I love that you are a wealth of knowledge, and I thought you did a really good job of explaining it in a very easily digestible way. So where do you want to send people to learn more about Kion?
I mean, really just our website. I think
Okay.
getkeon.com. But I think we have a special link for your audience.
Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes.
Okay.
I
But yeah,
don't know the link off the top of
we
my
have a
head, but
blog on there, and there's tons of information on the website. Also, like if there was anything that came up on this conversation where you want to like actually talk to someone, we have live phone customer service people here in our office, super knowledgeable, really cool people. So like you just talk, ask questions if you want to know more.
gotcha. And the link, just because I did remember, it's getkeon.com/Drew. So kind of
Okay.
easy to remember, but we'll also put that link in the show notes as well. So yeah, go check it out, you guys. Really good product, and I'll be honest with you guys, the flavor is on point. Like the watermelon one is probably my favorite, but all of them I've tasted all of them. They're all really good flavors, and you guys use stevia and monk fruit, which I love those two ingredients instead of other ones. So, Angelo, thank you so much for coming on, man. Really appreciate it, and thank you for sharing all your stories and being such an open book. So I appreciate it.
Thanks, Drew. It was fun, man.
Okay, talk to you soon.